Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So, today, well, actually, you shared some really interesting stuff with us.
Oh, yeah.
Slide deck.
Okay.
It's called Your 5 Secret Ingredients to Your Business Success with Keri and Karen, the 2Ks.
Catchy.
It is. And we're going to treat this like a treasure map
Okay.
for your business finances.
Right.
Really zeroing in on the crucial stuff,
Right.
especially if you're running things from home or just starting out.
Yeah.
Really think of this as like your personalized shortcut
Okay.
to understanding what makes the financial engine of your business tick.
I like that. A shortcut. So many people get lost in the weeds with all this, you know?
Totally. So much information out there.
Way too much.
Okay, so our mission today
Okay.
is to really unpack those key ideas, the ones you can actually use, without getting bogged down in, all that financial jargon.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that. We're not going to bore people with that.
Right. Straight to what matters for you and your business.
That's what we're all about.
So these secret ingredients, what are they all about?
The good stuff.
They're the core financial concepts that really every business owner needs to understand.
Yeah.
Cash flow, income, expenses, pricing, and break-in.
The fundamentals.
These aren't just like abstract terms. They're the nuts and bolts that hold everything together.
If you don't have these right, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. And getting a handle on these isn't just about surviving. It's about, building a business that can really thrive.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it.
And I think, a good way to start is looking at why these 5 areas are so critical for businesses in Australia.
Right. And the slide deck starts with some pretty eye-opening statistics.
Oh, yeah, I remember these.
About the business landscape here in Australia.
Wait.
About 20%, it says, of new Australian businesses just don't make it past their first year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough out there.
It is.
And then, sadly, that number climbs to about 60% within the first 3 years. So the majority of new businesses
Don't make it.
That's a scary thought for anyone starting out.
It is, yeah. It's important to be realistic about those challenges. But then if you look a bit longer, it's a little less scary, like over just 4 years. A pretty significant 35% of all Australian businesses closed up shop.
Wow.
Just over a 4-year period, from June 2019 to June 2023.
So that's a pretty big chunk.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating to me, and maybe a bit concerning.
What's that?
It seems like there's a big link to financial understanding. There's some research here from Zero. They suggest that something like 50% of small business owners have faced financial hurdles, not because their idea wasn't good, but just because they didn't really understand their own finances.
That's huge.
It is.
So it's like half of them are struggling because they don't have a grip on the money side of things.
That's what the research suggests.
Those figures are definitely, kind of a wake-up call. They really highlight that having a brilliant idea and a lot of passion, that's essential.
Yeah, you need that.
But it's not enough on its own.
Not even close.
Without a solid grip on that financial side of things, it's going to be a really, really tough road.
You're going to hit a wall. Yeah.
And that's why these 5 secret ingredients we're talking about, they aren't just like, oh, it'd be nice to know this. This is vital stuff.
Essential.
This is for navigating the ups and downs of running your own business, especially when you're doing everything from your home office or in those crucial early startup days.
You got it.
So, with that context in mind, let's dive into our first ingredient.
Let's do it.
Income.
All right, income. In simple terms, it's your revenue, right?
Okay.
The total amount of money your business brings in from selling your products or services.
Makes sense.
But it's not just about that overall number. It's about, how you generate that income.
Right.
And how to make the most of it.
So it's not just, oh, I made this much money. It's where did that come from?
Exactly. What are the sources, and are they sustainable?
Okay, so the slides, they emphasize a few key strategies to boost your income.
Yeah, really good stuff here.
One of the first things they highlight is the importance of pricing your services or your projects accurately.
Pricing. So important, and so many people get it wrong.
They do. And it's not about just picking a number you think sounds good.
No. It's got to be strategic.
It's about making sure you factored in all your costs, and this is absolutely crucial, and then adding a margin that covers those costs and also gets you to your break-even point.
Break-even, we'll get to that. But yeah, you got to know your numbers.
We will. But pricing, it's so important.
Absolutely. And the slides also stress the need to track your costs
Yeah.
for each service, each project, really carefully.
So you know where every dollar's going
Exactly. And review those costs often.
regularly.
Yeah, make it a habit. That way you can see if you're overspending anywhere, and importantly, make sure you charge for any changes or additions
Right.
to the original scope of work. Good communication with your clients is really key here to avoid any nasty surprises.
So if the project kind of evolves,
Which it often does.
your income needs to reflect that extra work you're putting in.
Exactly.
Okay. And it's not just about, what you're currently offering.
Right.
The slides encourage you to take a good look at your services and your skill set. What other things could you be offering?
Yeah, think outside the box.
Right. Like, are there ways you could use your existing skills in new areas?
Yeah, maybe a different market.
Or maybe develop some completely new offerings that could bring in, additional revenue streams.
Multiple income streams. That's the key to stability.
It's about constantly evaluating what you can do and looking for opportunities to grow that income.
Always be growing.
Always. And what's fascinating to me is how this connects back to that research we mentioned. That statistic, about over half of small businesses making decisions based on incomplete financial information every single month.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that likely includes not having a full understanding of their income potential.
Absolutely. If you don't know what you could be making, how can you make good decisions?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that 50% of, self-employed individuals face those financial difficulties because they don't have that financial literacy,
Yeah.
that directly impacts their ability to manage and grow their revenue.
It all comes down to understanding your numbers.
It does. It all ties together. You can't make smart choices about your business if you don't have a clear picture of where the money's coming from
And where it could be coming from.
and how you might be able to increase that flow. The slides then pose a direct question to our listener.
Oh, I like this. Getting interactive.
What's your income?
Simple but powerful.
Right. It's straightforward, but it makes you stop and think
Yeah.
about your current situation.
It's a reality check.
Yeah.
Now let's switch gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the second secret ingredient, expenses. This is where the money's going out.
Right. Expenses. The slides break these down into some really helpful categories.
They do. Makes it much easier to digest.
Yeah, so first we've got fixed costs, things like rent if you have an office, utilities, insurance, salaries if you have employees, and any regular subscriptions you've got.
Those are the ones that tend to stay pretty much the same each month.
Right, pretty consistent. Then you've got variable costs, which, well, as the name suggests, they kind of change.
They fluctuate.
Yeah, depending on your business activity. So
Yeah.
think about like raw materials you need, packaging for your products, shipping costs, marketing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, those can really vary depending on how busy you are.
Exactly. Then we've got operational expenses.
Yeah.
And that covers like the day-to-day running of your business. So things like office supplies, software, maintenance costs, all that.
That's stuff you need to keep the lights on.
And then you've got professional services,
Right.
which is for things like your accountant, legal fees, any consultants you might be using.
The experts you bring in to help you.
And then, of course, taxes.
Can't forget those.
No, definitely not. Taxes and fees. So that includes sales tax, income tax, any business licenses you need, and also loan payments and interest if you have any debt.
It all adds up.
It does. And you know what I thought was really interesting? The slides make a point about understanding where these different types of costs actually show up,
Yeah, good point.
like in your financial overview. Because some costs are going to be on your profit and loss statement, which shows how your business is performing like over a period of time.
Right.
But then others, especially if they're related to bigger assets or liabilities, are going to be on your balance sheet.
Yeah, it's important to know the difference.
It's a crucial distinction to grasp because it helps you get that clearer picture of the overall, financial health of your business.
Absolutely. So once you've got those categories down, the slides offer some really practical tips.
Oh, yeah, for how to improve your expense tracking
Exactly.
and really just the accuracy of your recording.
Yeah, because if you're not tracking it accurately, it's all garbage in, garbage out.
So, like, what are some of the simple things people can do?
Well, first and foremost, keep all your receipts.
Every single one.
Every single one. Whether you prefer paper copies or digital, doesn't matter.
Right. Whatever works for you.
Just make sure you're recording every single business transaction. It sounds basic.
Yeah, but it's so important.
But you'd be surprised how many people slip up here.
Yeah, they let things fall through the cracks.
Exactly. And then another really good habit to get into, reconcile your bank statements every month.
So you're checking everything matches up.
Yeah. That way, you'll catch any errors, any unexpected transactions.
And obviously, a key part of managing expenses is making sure you're not overspending.
Right.
So the slides suggest actively looking for ways to cut unnecessary costs.
Every dollar counts.
It does. And they also say try to negotiate with your suppliers. Maybe you can get a better price.
Always worth asking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they had this interesting idea of maybe considering outsourcing certain tasks
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
instead of hiring full-time employees.
Especially when you're starting out, that can be a real game changer.
Much more cost-effective. Now, when we look at the research around expenses, it really reflects some of the same challenges we saw with understanding income. A significant 60% of small businesses, according to this, don't keep detailed records of their expenses.
Oof, that's a lot.
Right. Or they're not tracking their financials regularly. That's a huge blind spot.
Huge. You can't manage what you don't measure.
And then, remember that statistic about 56% of small businesses making decisions based on incomplete financial information?
Yeah?
Well, that's probably because they're not tracking expenses properly.
Most likely. You can't make informed decisions if you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. And you know what I thought was really helpful in the slides? They had this analogy of thinking about your business expenses like fuel for a car.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So essential expenses, those are like the fuel you need to just keep the car running.
Gotta have it.
Right. And then growth expenses. Those are like investing in better fuel or maybe some upgrades for your car.
To help you go further.
Yeah, to go further, faster.
I like that.
But then wasted expenses, that's like a leak in your fuel tank.
Oh, no. Just draining away.
And then unforeseen expenses, those are like getting a flat tire.
Unexpected.
But you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So as the slides say, the goal is to maximize your efficiency, to spend your money wisely so you can go the furthest with the least amount of waste.
Makes sense.
It's a really good way to visualize it. It's not about just cutting all spending.
No.
It's about being strategic, making sure every dollar you spend is actually moving you towards your goals.
Getting a return on your investment. And of course, the slides have another one of those your turn prompts.
Oh, yeah.
This time encouraging you to think critically about your own expenses.
What are you spending your money on? Where could you be more efficient?
Exactly. Now, ready to move on to the next ingredient.
Let's do it.
Ingredient number 3, pricing.
All right, pricing. This is such a delicate balance.
It is. So many factors to consider.
And the slides really get into what you should actually be thinking about when you set your prices.
Yeah, it's more than just slapping a number on something.
Absolutely. It's definitely more than just the cost of materials.
Right.
You need to factor in your labor.
Yeah, your time is valuable.
It is, and a lot of people forget that.
Yeah, they undervalue themselves. You got to pay yourself fairly.
Absolutely. And then there are the direct costs associated with whatever you're selling, plus any subcontractors or outsourced help you might be using.
All those extra hands that go into making it happen.
And then something that a lot of people overlook, administration and overhead expenses.
Oh, yeah, those hidden costs.
And the slides even mention things like credit card processing fees, if that's how your customers are paying.
It's a small percentage, but it adds up.
It does. So they give this really useful example of how you can build some of these indirect costs into your pricing.
Oh, okay. How do they suggest you do that?
By adding a margin on top of your direct costs.
So you're not just covering your materials and labor.
Exactly. And then they say include a percentage allowance
Okay.
to cover those general admin and overhead expenses.
So you're building in a buffer.
Yeah, you're making sure everything is accounted for.
Makes sense.
It's about taking a comprehensive look at all the costs involved in delivering your product or service.
Leaving no stone unturned.
Right. And then, of course, they talk about doing your homework, your market research.
Oh, yeah, you got to know your market.
You need to understand what similar services or products are going for. But it's not about just being the cheapest.
No, you don't want to race to the bottom.
No, you don't. The advice is to really think about your pricing based on the value you offer.
Value pricing.
Yeah, what makes you unique? What makes your offering better?
Why should someone choose you over the competition?
And that's where understanding your ideal customer really comes in.
Yeah, who are you targeting? What are they willing to pay?
And then the slides talk about monitoring your sales and profit margins.
Okay, so once you've set your prices, the work doesn't stop there.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Are you actually making the profit you thought you'd be making? And are you charging for any extra work?
Oh, the scope creep.
Yes, all those changes in scope that always seem to happen. All your work has value. So if you end up doing more than was agreed upon, make sure you communicate those changes, get their agreement, and don't be afraid to charge.
Know your worth.
And as they say, you've already got the client, so make sure you're being compensated properly.
Good point.
Now, the slides acknowledge that data on pricing understanding, specifically for home-based businesses and startups, can be hard to come by. But they did reference a NAMBE survey that found a significant portion of small businesses struggle to price their products or services effectively. And, when you think about the fact that small businesses make up the vast majority of businesses in Australia, that's a pretty widespread challenge.
It is, and it highlights how important it is to really get your pricing strategy right.
So the slides use a really good analogy here. They compare setting your prices to setting the admission price for a theme park.
Oh, I like that.
If it's too high, you might not get enough visitors.
You're pricing yourself out of the market.
But if it's too low, you might be overwhelmed.
You'll be busy, but you won't be making any money.
Exactly. So it's about finding that balance, attracting customers, but also making sure you're making a profit.
It's a tightrope walk.
And they mentioned different pricing strategies. Dynamic pricing, value-based pricing, competitive pricing. It's about finding what works best for you.
And what aligns with your business goals.
Now, they also provide a really fantastic list of resources, websites that offer more detailed guidance on developing your pricing strategy.
Oh, excellent.
Like whether you're looking at what your competitors are doing or focusing on the value you provide or basing it on your costs.
So helpful.
These are practical tools you can use. And of course, they've got another your turn prompt.
You're good at those.
This time, asking you to really think about your own pricing strategy.
Are you charging what you're worth?
Exactly. Are you leaving money on the table?
Okay, let's move on. Ingredient number 4, a big one. Break even.
All right, break even. This is a concept that's so key to understanding if your business is actually viable.
Yeah, it's not just about making money. It's about making enough money to cover all your costs.
And the slides describe it really well as that point where your total revenue, all the money you're bringing in, equals your total costs.
So you're not making a profit, but you're not losing money.
Exactly. And they use this great analogy of hiking in the mountains.
Okay, I'm listening.
Knowing your break-even point, it's like having a map. Without it, you're putting in all this effort, you're hiking, but you don't actually know if you're making progress.
You could be going in circles.
Exactly. So if you don't know your break-even point, you might be making sales, but you could be running out of money before you ever actually reach that point of sustainability.
You could be working really hard, but ultimately going nowhere.
So how do you actually figure out your break-even point?
Right. How do we calculate this?
Well, the slides explain its risk. It's based on your total direct costs, any salaries you're paying, and this is important, any drawings you're taking from the business for yourself.
So you're factoring in your own personal needs.
Absolutely. And then you consider all of that in relation to the number of productive available hours you have.
So it's taking into account how much time you're actually spending working on the business.
Exactly. And that inclusion of personal drawings, it's so important, especially for those home-based businesses, sole traders.
Yeah, because a lot of times people aren't paying themselves a formal salary.
Right. They're just taking money out of the business as they need it.
So it's easy to lose track of how much you're actually taking out.
And that's why the slides say you need to factor in a realistic figure for those drawings as part of your costs.
To get a true picture.
Yeah, because otherwise you might think you're breaking even, but you're actually not covering your own living expenses.
Right. And then the research on understanding break-even, it really highlights how significant this is. It's seen as crucial for financial planning, making sure you're profitable. It helps you set realistic sales targets. And it also helps you develop, really informed pricing strategies.
Right, because you know exactly what you need to sell to cover your costs.
Precisely. And interestingly, some studies say that around 30% of small businesses actually do break even.
Okay.
But that means a large portion might not be consistently profitable.
Because they haven't grasped this concept.
Exactly. They might be making sales, but they might not actually be covering all their costs.
And that's why this your turn prompt is so important.
It's time to do the math.
Sit down, figure out your break-even point.
All right, on to our 5th and final secret ingredient. This one's a biggie.
Okay, let's hear it.
Cash flow.
Cash flow. It's often called the lifeblood of any business.
It really is. If you don't have cash flowing, you're in trouble.
And the slides emphasize how critical it is to keep a close eye on it.
You got to be monitoring this constantly.
To make sure you've always got enough money on hand to cover those immediate bills and expenses.
And that's where things can get tricky.
So they break it down into cash inflows, which is all the money coming into your business. Sales, loans, investments, all that.
The money coming in the door.
And then cash outflows, all the money going out. Expenses, payroll, rent, taxes, loan payments,
Everything you're spending.
and then net cash flow is simply the difference between those two.
So you want that number to be positive.
More money coming in than going out.
Hmm.
And the slides talk about the importance of being able to spot potential cash shortages in advance.
Yeah, you don't want to be caught off guard.
Like, are there times a year when your income might dip? Or do you have big expenses coming up?
Like the Christmas shutdown.
Exactly. So being able to anticipate those potential shortfalls, it allows you to adjust your spending.
Or maybe look at some short-term financing
I mean,
options.
if you need it. Now, they offer some really practical strategies for improving your cash flow.
Yeah, these are good.
A big one is reducing unnecessary expenses.
Cutting the fat.
So look hard at your spending. What can you do without? And optimize your inventory management.
You don't want too much cash tied up in stock.
Right. And then they say, build up a cash reserve.
Or a rainy day fund.
They suggest aiming for 3 to 6 months worth of essential expenses.
So you've got a buffer.
Yeah, for unexpected costs or if sales slow down.
Good advice.
And then they strongly recommend keeping your personal and business finances completely separate.
Dedicated bank account.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that separation makes it much easier to actually see the financial health of your business.
It gets rid of all that noise from your personal spending.
And then another strategy they talk about is improving control over your debtor's ledger.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, how quickly your customers are paying you.
Getting paid on time.
Because if you're not getting paid, you don't have cash flow.
Right, makes sense.
So getting those invoices paid promptly, that has a huge impact.
Keeps the money moving.
And the research around cash flow challenges is pretty alarming. One study found that 50% of small businesses have less than 15 days of cash reserves.
That's scary.
It is. They're living on the edge. And then a really concerning 82% of small business failures are attributed to poor cash flow management.
So it's the #1 reason businesses go under.
That's what they're
It
saying.
really underscores how important it is to get a handle on this.
And the slides even point you towards some good resources and templates on the Business Victoria website.
Always good to have more tools.
And then, of course, we have our final Your Turn prompt.
Always got to end with some action.
This one focusing on your cash flow situation.
How healthy is your cash flow?
All right. So we've taken a good look at all 5 of these secret ingredients. And the slides do a nice job of recapping them. Cash flow, income, expenses, pricing, and break-in.
The 5 pillars of business success.
And they sum it up with this really great message. Understanding financials, getting to know where your money goes.
It's all about awareness.
And then they even provide a simplified explanation of how GST works.
Okay, yeah, taxes can be confusing.
So assuming your business is registered for it, they walk through an example of a sale and a purchase,
Okay.
showing how you collect GST from your customers and then offset the GST you've paid on your expenses and how you end up with a net GST amount you have to pay to the ATO.
So you're not paying GST on everything.
Yeah,
It's the difference between what you've collected and what you've paid.
And then they clarify the difference between some key financial reports, like your balance sheet, which gives you a snapshot of what your business owns, your assets, what it owes, your liabilities.
Right.
And then the difference between those two, which is your equity.
Your net worth.
And all of that is at a specific point in time.
So it's like a photograph of your business.
Whereas your profit and loss statement, that shows your revenue minus your expenses over a period of time.
So it's more like a video showing how your business is performing over time.
And that gives you your profit or loss before income tax. And they say, check with your accountant on your specific income tax rate.
Always good advice.
They also mention PAWG installments.
Ah, yes, paying your income tax throughout the year.
And they stress setting aside those funds if you're on that system.
You don't want to be hit with a big bill at the end of the year.
And when it comes to GST, they recommend running your balance sheet monthly so you can see what you owe and set those funds aside.
Good practice.
And the same principle applies to PAG withholding and superannuation if you have employees.
Put that money aside as you go.
Exactly. Don't treat it as your own. And the key takeaway here is when you clearly separate out the money that isn't actually yours, it's so much easier to see your true financial position.
It takes the emotion out of it.
Right. And then they briefly touch on cash flow reporting, saying it's a valuable tool, but it's most useful when you look at it in combination with your other reports.
So it's one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. Especially when you consider things like payment terms with your customers.
Because when you get paid can really affect your cash flow.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the 5 secret ingredients for business success. As outlined in the materials you shared, we've explored cash flow, income, expenses, pricing, and break-even.
All the essentials.
And we really hope this conversation has given you a clearer understanding of these core elements.
And more importantly, some actionable steps you can take.
Because ultimately, understanding your numbers isn't just about avoiding those scary failure statistics.
No, it's about empowering yourself.
It's about building a business that's not only sustainable, but one that can really thrive.
Building something you're proud of.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider.
All right, lay it on us.
Looking at these 5 areas: cash flow, income, expenses, pricing, and break-even. Which one feels like the biggest opportunity or the biggest challenge for your business right now?
Good question.
And what's one small step you could take today to gain a little more clarity in that area?
Small steps lead to big results. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
It has. Thanks for being here.